Hey, how's it going? I want to spend a second talking about something I'm thinking about. So I am 10 days out of total knee replacement or total knee resurfacing. Maybe that's a more sexy way to think about it. Get my new ends of my bones all polished and chrome and shiny. But one of the things that I'm continually trying to press my own thinking about is the overlap between the coaching, physical training world and the rehab medicine world. And clearly there's overlap on both sides if we were going to draw a Venn diagram. But really one of the things that kind of came about in this surgery was that when I went and presented myself to my surgeon and we were looking at the MRI and the radiographs, there was some talk about, is this really that bad? What's going on with this? And, I could demonstrate. I had said, hey, I just pulled, 500 a week ago. I can squat, but I'm losing some of this functionality. Okay, and the reason I'm setting this context up is that once they got into the surgery, they were blown away at what was actually going on inside my knee in terms of the degenerative changes, significant changes on some of those weight-bearing surfaces. I had gigantic defects in the bones themselves and a really unhealthy tissue around there. So once I got in there, they were like, I can't believe you didn't have this much pain or any pain or little pain and as much function as you did, which means that we are always doing something we call treat the man, not the scan. So what we want to appreciate is that there are changes in tissues that happen over time. That's for sure. And it can be argued about, can we minimize some of those changes? Because I had pretty awesome joint surfaces on the other compartment, just this lateral compartment, which is the mechanism of injury was skiing very fast, making a hard left cranking turn, hip on the snow and just slid out. And the ski caught going about 50 miles an hour. And when that ski caught, I ended up putting my femur through my tibia. I ended up standing up. My wife came down, she's like, oh, you're covered in snow. I was like, yeah, I just sprained my knee and skied down. But in the meanwhile, I had basically put my femur through my tibia and created these gigantic lesions. Now, when I went and saw the physician about 4 or 5 months later, I could finally get an MRI because it was swelling. The recommendation was, hey, let's replace your knee soon because you're gonna need to do that eventually anyway. So let's go ahead and just get on it. I said, hey, let's actually wait a minute because I'm still getting a lot of function out of this knee. So that's sort of the setup for this conversation about should we be letting pain drive our discussions about surgery? Or should we be letting pain drive our decisions about working out or not working out, right? Now, clearly, pain, chronic pain, persistent pain is a big deal. But what happens if I don't have pain? How do I manage this? How do I think about this? So I want to introduce you, if you've never heard this before, to the thinking of an incredible sociologist named Saad Nagi, or Nagi, in 1965, and put forward a model about disability called the Nagi model. And what's important about this idea is that Nagi did a couple things really well. Helped us to kind of bridge, I think, for me, the conceptualization of where I am as a coach, where I am as a physical therapist, and where these things intertwine. So when he talks about impairment, the word impairment in this situation means, hey, we have changes in tissues, we have changes in organ systems, we have changes in whole body organ systems, or organs, or whole body organ systems, whole body systems, and there are changes in the functionality of those things. So that means, hey, I tore my ACL in college, or I had a really bad ankle sprain. It doesn't always have to be deep, pathology, Lyme disease, history of Lyme disease, or coming back after, some other disease, or managing chronic MS, for example, right? Impairments are really the domain of most of the coaching language that we see. And to manage impairments, right, because those are changes in that system, again, what we want to appreciate is that we treat the man, not the scan. So we run the idea that there are impairments in our bodies as we age or as accumulate trauma or microtrauma as athletes, as competitors, and that may or may not ever mean anything to the system. That may not actually express biomotor output changes, right? There may not be a change in power, a change in wattage. And we see that all the time. What's interesting though is that, of course, if we start with the impairment tissue damage model first, hey, look at this trauma to your joints, then we're going to always end up chasing the fact that, or be limited by the fact of fear, not the fact of outcome and expression of the tissues. So this is going to happen, right? This is what we know happens. But the next level then is what we call functional impairment, or what he called functional impairment. And impairment. And the reason functional impairment is important is that what we start to see is the individual downregulation of function. So downregulation. And what we're talking about here is, hey, I had to modify something in my training. I had to modify. So for me, I have significant impairment of my knee system 7 years ago, right? And my functional impairment was double under, stop feeling good. I ran a half marathon last September, a little over a year ago, did the Spartan World Championships, and I just couldn't find a good running pattern or position that felt good. Couldn't absorb force through the joint. I stopped squatting so much. I could deadlift, I could do step-ups, but eccentric loading, I couldn't find a position. I went from power cleans to muscle cleans. Those are my functional impairments. And so what ends up happening is that we start to see the expressions in function as related to the impairment. Again, is this good enough reason to have surgery, yes or no? And for me, it wasn't enough because I could still do a ton. I could ride my bike. I was able to ski for a while with my family. But where Nagi really gets it right is talking about disability and defining disability. And this is really the disability. This is really the magic here, is talking about role. Talking about role in work, role in family, role in society, right? And what happens is that suddenly we give context and voice to all this, which means I can't do my job or employment, right? I can't occupy my societal roles in the family, or I can't engage in self-care, I can't engage in leisure activity, I can't engage in education. All of those things are equally important in this role of disability. So what ends up happening then for me, because I can't be waiting around until I have so much pain that I'm now, disabled through pain, my disability was in the role of, hey, I can no longer occupy my role or do my job effectively as a coach, teacher, and also this is starting to interrupt my time with my family skiing. This is interrupting my time with my family training. This is interrupting my time with my family playing, hiking, all of those things. And so when we begin to sort of move away from obsessing about what's going on in the MRI, obsessing about what's going on in the CAT scan or the radiograph, we know that there are changes that happen. Again, maybe if we moved a little bit more effectively, we had better nutrition, better adaptation, can we limit some of these? We start with the hypothesis that you're going to be 110 years old, that your body is easily designed to be 110 years old. We see people run around with herniated discs that are asymptomatic forever and ever, right? We know that biopsychosocial person, right, that the level of stress, the level of sort of anxiety, the level of environmental kind of pressures on the person is easily enough to sensitize an impairment into becoming a pain situation. But notice here, what we're not talking about is that pain is really a different idea. And what we're trying to do is have pain not be the driver of behavior change, but information. Clearly, I want to be able to manage it or modulate it. That's important. And I may come to a place where that pain is the driver of my disability. Can't occupy my role in society, can't occupy my role in my family, can't do my job because pain limits. But that only is a small piece of it. And one of those pieces is important that maybe or may or not we have pain, so we better have a different language around this. So impairment, understanding that most people are going to show up at your gym with some kind of impairment. Why? Because we're human beings, right? This functional impairment, or we should say functional limitation, maybe is the language that they use. This functional limitation is this idea that I can't do something, right? In terms of actually the expression of that. Can't generate force, but I can still train, do it at whatever. We have 150 things we can do in the gym. We probably need 100 of them to go to Olympics, so we can take 50 of them off. But the real magic is this disability. So for me, I needed to have surgery. Why? Because I was disabled. Because for me, not waiting around until I had pain was not good enough. And when they finally got into my joint and looked around, everyone had a good laugh. Hopefully that helps.